Hello and welcome again, everybody. Today I'm making a video to discuss our timeline and timeline paper, parts 1 and part 2. I mentioned in our introductory video that I wanted to do a separate video just because there's so much content associated with these larger projects. I wanted to make sure you had a separate video to go back to. So just a quick overview before I get into the specifics. So basically what we're doing a 2-part project. Part 1, we're doing a 30-date timeline that examines an evolution of a social welfare program. So you're going to choose a social welfare topic, and then you're going to talk about 30 different dates that have informed the evolution and creation of the program and policy from its genesis all the way through to its current state, if it still exists. The other piece is the timeline paper, which will occur a couple weeks after the first part of the timeline. The timeline paper is a research paper where you are taking 5 of those 30 dates, and you are zooming in on the 5 that you feel are the most important, and you are expanding on the important aspects of why you chose those dates. So how do those play into the larger picture and providing more detail as to why those 5 dates are important. So this is going to make a lot more sense when you get a chance to see things visually. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to jump straight into things. So you can get to these same areas through the modules. I've linked those through the modules as reminders. But I'm just going to jump straight to them on the side tab. So I'm going to start with timeline part 1. Currently you're watching the video. And I'm going to timestamp this video so that you can just watch the first half right now if you want, or you can watch the whole thing so you have the full picture of part 1 and part 2, and then you can come back when necessary to watch part 2 later. So I'm going to first start by opening the timeline instructions. Now, usually I'm not a big fan of like reading through things, but because these are our big projects in the class, I want to make sure to kind of read through some of the most important pieces so that nothing is being missed and I have a chance to go through and explain anything that's on paper. So the first part, we're just looking at the submission instructions. So it says attach assignment in Blackboard under the timeline. Once you're under the tab, click timeline assignment submission and attach your assignment as a Word document. Do not copy and paste your text into the submission box. So I mentioned in the syllabus that you have to have access to Word. If you are using a Mac computer, you have to make sure that when you save your file, you do your save your file as and do a doc, because for whatever reason the pages file type does not work with Blackboard. So there are various forms of docs that will work, like docx, that kind of stuff. But if your file saves as .pages, then you're going to have to find a new way to save it before you can submit it. According to the syllabus, so this is just pulled straight from that syllabus. So this is the general instructions that I kind of briefly went over. We are submitting a timeline on a social welfare topic with a minimum of 30 dates or of key or significant events, laws, or policies related to the topic. The topic must be chosen from the provided list of social welfare programs or by approval of the instructor. You'll then submit your chosen topic on a related discussion board that'll be linked to the timeline instruction tab. Topics will be assigned on a first come, first served basis. So I'm going to stop right there and jump over and explain what that means. So I do have a link right here that's going to take us to the bonus discussion board. Let me jump actually over to the discussion board tab itself, since this doesn't have the instructions listed on it. You can go ahead and create your thread straight from here if you wish. But just so that you have a reference to go back to, when I jump over to the discussion board quick access, which is where all of our discussion boards are listed, this has the full list of programs that you can choose from, and it also has the instructions about how to submit your chosen topic. If you watched all the way to the end of the syllabus video, then you saw that you could go ahead and submit this early. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to choose a program from this list, and you're going to create a thread that has you identifying which program it is that you're interested in writing about. The instructions are listed right here regarding how you're going to do that. The big thing that I want you to know is that if you click on the discussion board itself and a thread has already started and someone has chosen your topic already, then you have to do something else. So like if someone has already chosen Medicaid, then you can't do Medicaid. You have to choose a different topic. So that will be the first step, is just claiming the topic that you want to do. The reason that we're doing this is I found that over time, a lot of individuals flock towards the same topics, and it really doesn't benefit you to go up against 15 other people that are doing the same topic, because things that look like minor deficiencies really start to stack up when you see it against all those other papers. So it really works in your benefit to have an original piece that you're submitting that doesn't look like a copy and paste version of someone else's work. Okay, so that's gonna be the first part. And so once we choose our program, then the next thing is you're gonna go through and you're gonna research dates that have influenced the evolution of that program. And I'm gonna show you what that means in a second. I have some samples posted, so we'll get a chance to see what a completed timeline looks like. Here in the purple, it says each event should include the date, the event, and a short paragraph describing the event. This really helps with the formatting. It really helps me see everything easier. It helps me quickly identify those 30 dates. So this really helps with the grading piece and for your general organization. So we get a lot of questions about references. So for timeline part 1, you do have to have a references page. So after you do your 30 dates, then at the end of that, you're going to put a references page where you just have your references listed. You will need at least 3 references, 3 different sources for your assignment. Now, for timeline part 2, you're going to do in-text citations or parenthetical citations in addition to a references page. The in-text citations are not are going to be required for part 1. It will be required for part 2, so it still benefits you to go ahead and keep track of those. And if you want to do in-text citations for part 1, go ahead and go for it. The next important piece is that your work will be submitted through SafeAssign, which checks your assignment for plagiarism against other individuals and against the internet. So make sure that you aren't just like copying and pasting from source material, because SafeAssign will find it and it will flag it, and then you'll be getting an email from me asking you to redo your work. So quick look at the grading criteria. So 0.75 points each for each 30 of the dates just simply being identified. Another 0.75 points for accurately giving a description in a form of a short paragraph describing the detail and meaning of each date. And then 5 points for overall presentation, spelling, mechanics, formatting, that kind of stuff. At the bottom of that are some pro tips. I'm not going to go into that in depth in this video. You can go back and read this. But the one thing that I will say from this list is if you are wanting to do a good job in terms of like looking in depth into something, I've found it to be easier if you choose a topic that you're passionate about. So even if you are addressing a social issue in some form or fashion, right? Like let's say you're passionate about working with poverty, then maybe the program that you choose is something like working with SNAP or TANF, for example. And so even though you're not focusing on poverty directly, you're focusing on a program that helps address some form of poverty. And so if you're doing research towards something that ignites a passion in you, then you're going to want to do a better job with those 30 dates. Okay, so closing off the instructions. As I said, this is the link to get to that discussion board, which you can also get to from the side. This is a sample timeline. So this is an individual that did a timeline over the Ryan White HIV/AIDS program. And so I'm not going to go through and read any of this. I just want to show you a couple quick things. So he just had his name, the name of the class and the date up here, and a quick title across the top, and I think that's great. And then for each date, it was real easy to see that there are 30 dates Actually, there's more than 30 dates on this sample. And for each one, there's the date, and then there is a quick, 3 or 4, 5-word description of what that date is, and then a 2 or 3 sentence brief paragraph about the importance of that date. So just so you could get a quick glance over what the formatting looks like. If you want to go through and read this, it'll help give you a sense of the tone that I'm looking for within the timeline as well. Now, the only thing that is missing from the sample is that when I originally had the individual submit this assignment, at the time I did not have them do a references page, but because there was some issues with Safe Assign at that time, that is something that I went back and added later. So imagine this assignment and then add a additional page called references where you list your references out for the assignment. And if you need help doing references, I would suggest Googling the OWL through Purdue, like Purdue University. And there is a great user guide in terms of like how to reference your source material. So definitely check that out. There's also the writer's room here at USI, which you can get assistance with your reference material as well. So I'm going to jump back here real quick. This is just an additional place where you can look at a list of all the welfare programs that are listed on the discussion board. And then this last piece is the timeline assignment submission. So when you click on here, first thing you see is the due date. And when you submit your paper, this is where I mentioned don't copy and paste anything into the comment box or anything like that, or click on the right submission and put it in here. You're going to make sure that you attach a file. So you're going to go to Browse Computer, you're going to choose your file, and you're going to drop it in here. And you see that because it's going through Safe Assign only accepts certain file types, and here they are listed. The ones that are the best are these first two, doc and docx. These others are not going to be a preferred file type, so please try to avoid those. And as I said, Pages does not work from a Mac. Okay, so that's timeline part 1. Timeline part 2. So as I mentioned, timeline part 2 is zooming in on 5 of the most important dates of your timeline. So although this is not a follow-up from the first timeline where we're doing the Ryan White HIV/AIDS, this is a timeline paper that is looking at SNAP. So I thought it was important to show you different topics as well so that you can see how those were addressed. So your timeline paper is going to be a little more formal. I do want full APA referencing for the research paper. So you see a quick cover page on here with a running head, page numbers, title, student's name again. And then just real quickly before we jump back to the instructions for the timeline paper, I just wanted you to get a sense of what it is that this actually looks like. So there are 5 dates now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, really quickly to see because they went through and highlighted those. And this is going to be a narrow focusing of those dates. You'll also see that within those dates that there is now parenthetical citation. So a list of the reference, the source, plus the date. This is APA formatting. So make sure that when you're doing timeline part 2 that you're adding the in-text citation in there as well. Now, I didn't mention this in the first part, but this is a great reminder as I'm have this pulled up in front of me. When we're looking at SNAP, the very first thing that this individual chose to put was the Wall Street stock market crashed. So you might initially be asking yourself, like, what does the stock market crash have anything to do with SNAP? So one of the things that I think is helpful when you're looking at your dates for your 30 dates, and when you're looking at the 5 expanded dates, is that you don't have to choose a program or policy and just give me 30 dates that are changes to policy or development of a program or a branch of the program or something like that. It doesn't have to be 30 like technical dates that are only directly related to that topic. If you want to provide some sort of historical contextual dates, then that is awesome. So, so this person chose to write about the stock market crash leading up to the development of the food stamp program or SNAP. So that's great. So make sure that you think outside the box, especially if you're running into a wall getting your 30 dates. I welcome historical contextual dates as well that feed into the creation of that date. So here are the instructions for the timeline paper itself. So this one's going to look a little bit different. So again, just kind of reading through some of the key pieces. Using your completed timeline, select 5 of the most significant dates, program changes, or policies, and describe how they have shaped or impacted your social welfare program or policy as it exists today, using the criteria below as a guide. So you'll see that the grading matrix changed here as well. So now we got 10 points for structure, including organization and professional formatting. You also see 10 points for spelling, punctuation, mechanical errors. So you'll see a shift, a higher shift towards grades for things like the APA citation, formatting, those kinds of things, because the part 2 is more of a reference paper. So so we want to make sure that we're adjusting our style accordingly. And then down here, so another 10 for language, clear, consistent tone, sentence structure, and then 20 points for the actual content. And it shows how it's broken down. Detailed description of the event, explanation as to why the event is significant to your topic, a discussion reflecting how the event impacts social welfare today, and your personal perspectives on the event. So the one thing I will say about this last piece is that sometimes individuals will just post maybe like the first 3/4 of their date looks really good, really professional, and then as soon as they see the opportunity to do a personal perspective, their tone shifts. It's like they are talking to a best buddy. And I'll just say there is a way to identify your own personal opinion and perspective on the topic without shifting into like an informal conversational tone. So so if you're having problems with that, reach out to me and I can help. But just going to be aware of how you present that last piece within your timeline. Okay, so as I mentioned, the APA citation becomes a thing for your timeline paper part 2. So here's what I do need and what I don't need. So regarding APA citation, a minimum of 3 references. The requirements, I do want a title page. I do want what they call parenthetical citations. That was those in-text citations that were located in parentheses. And a references page, similar to what you did for part 1. And what I don't necessarily need, I don't need an abstract for sure. If you want to put running headers on there, that's cool. It doesn't really matter to me one way or the other if you do that. Again, I mentioned the OWL earlier. This is a reference to that and a link to that source. And then the things below are pro tips and other things to consider while you are doing your paper. So talking about proofreading before you submit. When we're talking about a citation, make sure that anything that's not an original thought of your own or what you would consider common knowledge is something that you're citing. So sometimes I see an individual put a whole page worth of content and they throw one citation at the very end of it. But that's not proper citation, because that really looks like everything leading up to that one sentence was your thought, and just that one last piece came from another source. Most of the stuff that you put in your paper should be cited, because most of this is not going to be common knowledge. You're going to be giving dates, historical context that most people aren't aware of. So you're going to need to make sure that you go back and cite your sources. It's like 5 events that are important to the overall development history and have abundance of widely accessible information to support your research. And then the other thing that I will include on here as well that I'll mention real briefly is that the minimum length is 3 pages, not including your cover or references page. But a well-written paper could easily stretch to 5 pages, or about 1 event per page. So so when I say 3 pages the minimum, that's only true if like you really just like knock out your dates. If you're having problems developing your thoughts in an efficient manner, you're going to want to expand just a little bit more, get closer to 4 or 5 pages to make sure that you give yourself the time to get the thoughts out there that you need. Okay, jumping back to this main page for the timeline paper. Again, there is that sample that you could go back and refer back to. And then similar to part 1, you're going to have another submission portal where you are going to come in here and you're going to attach your file just like you did before in your doc or docx format. So that is a quick overview of your timeline part 1 and your timeline paper part 2. Those will be coming up fairly quick in the class. So after week 1, you especially want to start looking and working on your timeline pretty quickly, and then not soon after, or not too long after your part 1, you want to go ahead and start your part 2 as well. You know, you could start that immediately after. Some people work on both simultaneously, because if you're going through and you're getting your dates for your 30 and you run across one of those dates and you're like, wow, there's a lot of content right here in this one date, then it kind of makes sense for you to go ahead and just pull that information to the side, knowing that, you know, if your mind is going, man, I don't know how to thin this out for a 2 or 3 sentence overview for the 30 dates, that's a really good indicator that maybe that's one of those really important dates that you can go ahead and expand upon for your paper. So some people do those simultaneously as well. So I'm going to end this video here. I know this was a little bit lengthy as well, but I wanted you to have a source to go back to hear from me kind of what my expectations are for the paper. The instructions should line all this information out as well, but I wanted you to be able to have this to go back to reference. So, and I know that this isn't always enough, and sometimes we need to talk through details a little bit more and answer questions, which is great. So if you have more questions after this, feel free to call me or email me, or we could set up a Zoom meeting to go through and talk about those, and I'll be happy to address any sort of concerns you have. All right, I'm going to end this video here. I really appreciate you tuning in, and I look forward to your submissions. Thanks.